Okay, 11.6 on sums and differences of radicals. So the actual lesson starts on page 475, but the examples that we will get into are on page 477. So we're going to start with number 1, and as we're starting with these, I'll explain how we add and subtract radicals. So the only way that we could add and subtract radicals is if the radical sign matches. It's almost kind of like you have to have a common denominator when you add and subtract fractions. Well, you have to have a common radical to be able to combine them or put them together. Kind of like the same way, for example, like if you have 2x plus 3x plus 4y. We can't add the y with the x's. This is like our apples, and this is our orange. So you have 5x plus 4y is your answer. It's the same way with the adding and subtracting of radicals. So the first thing I need to look is, do my radical signs match? Well, they're both the square root of 17. So that means I can add them together. But it's also like fractions in a sense, and even like with the variables and that we just did. Like if you have 1/5 plus 2/5, when you add, your denominator stays the same. So it's 3/5. You just add your numerator. Well, when we're adding and subtracting radicals, what you need to do is you leave this alone. So you're actually only adding what's there in front of the radical. So 5 plus 8 is 13, and then it would be square root 17. That's your answer. Number 3. Number 3 is 2 square root 6 plus 8 square root 6. I make sure that the square roots match, and they do. So 2 plus 8 is 10 square root 6. Number 5. Oops, sorry. Number 5 is 7 square root 6 minus 2 square root 6 plus 18 square root 6. Well, I look, they all match. So now I just go from left to right because it's adding and subtracting. So 7 minus 2 is 5, and 5 plus 18 is 23. Square root 6 is my answer. Let me write this a little smaller so that you can see it. There we go. Number 7. Actually, we can skip. Let's go to number 9. This is a good one. Let's start at the top. Number 9 is 6 square root 6 plus 2 square root 3 plus 5 square root 3 minus 5 square root 6. When I look, they're not all the same, but I have matching ones. Let's do a squiggly line under this one because they're both square root of 6, which means I can combine those. So 6 minus 5 is 1. So my answer would be 1 square root 6. You don't have to have the 1. You can just write square root. That is fine too. And then these, we'll put a circle around them, are both square root 3. So I look at their signs. This is positive and this is positive. So 2 plus 5 is 7. So plus 7 square root 3 is our answer. Let's move down to number 11. Now on these we can add, but we have to simplify first to make sure that we can add them together. So I have 2 plus 8 times the square root of 4. Well, the square root of 4, I have this 2, plus the square root of 4 is 2. So 2, this means it's multiplied because it's smushed up there together. So 2 times 8 is 16. So 2 times 16, or 2 plus 16 is 18. Number 13. 3 square root 5 minus the square root of 45. Now, right now, it appears that we cannot subtract these two because they both don't have the same square root. But when I look at 5, 5 is simplified all the way down, but the square root of 45 is not. So we need to simplify that. So I have 3 square root 5 minus, what times what equals 45? Well, I know 9 times 5 equals 45. When I look at that, that's a perfect square root, so I can simplify it. So I'm going to rewrite this, 3 square root of 5 minus, the square root of 9 is 3, so we get to mark that out, and it gets to go on the outside, and then what's left is the 5 on the inside. Well, 3 square root of 5 minus 3 square root of 5 is 0. Let's skip to 15. Actually, do I want to do 15 or 18? Let's do 18. Six square root 12 minus 3 square root 75 plus 2 square root 27. Well, when we first look at this, it appears that we cannot be able to do anything with this, that this would be done. But that is not the case, because 12, the square root of 12, the square root of 75, and the square root of 27 can be simplified down. So we're going to look to see what we're able to combine here. So I want to break down 12. So 6 times the square root, 12 would be, I want to think of a perfect square. So 4 times 3. We'll go ahead and simplify these as we go, and then we'll be able to finish our answer out at the end. So the square root of 4 is 2. So that gets marked off, and then 2 times, so I get to multiply that by the 2 because it goes out there too. So it's 12 square root 3. Let's go to 75. So we have 3 times, I got to think of 75. So what times what equals 75? Think of money, quarters. That's 25. We'll put our minus sign here, times 3. So the square root of 25 is 5. So we cross that off because it gets to go to the outside. We have to multiply it to that 3. So that becomes 15 square root 3, because that 3 is left over. Plus, now we have to break down this 27. So what times what equals 27? And that's 9 times 3. And 9 is a perfect square root. So the square root of 9 is 3. So we mark that off. So times 3. So 2 times 3 is 6. Square root of 3, because that 3 is left there in the middle. Now it's addition, subtraction. Square root of 3, square root of 3, square root of 3. I get to add these all together, and I get, so 12 minus 15 plus 6 is 3, and the square root of 3 would go right there by it. All right, let's take a look at, that was number 18, which I did that one, and it could be on your homework, so everyone hopefully will get that one correct. I meant to do 19, but that's okay. So let's do 19 now. So 19 is 2 square root of 45 minus 6 square root 12 plus 9 square root 80. Now, many of you may think that you are able to go from this to this, or from this one to this one, but I don't believe that that's the case, just because even my Algebra 1 students, they have to work through it this way to get the answer. So on your homework, you're going to be showing me how you get from here to here to here to work these out and get the correct answer. So let's simplify this, because right now we can't add any of these, but I know that these can be simplified. So let's get started with that. So 2 times, I have the square root of 45. So I got to think what times what equals 45, and I know that that is 9 and 5. So the square root of 9, I get to mark that off, is 3. So 2 times 3 is 6 square root 5. Got our first one. So minus, we're going to break down this square root 12 would be 4 times 3. And I could say that 6 times 2 is as well, but 6 and 2 are not perfect square roots, so I don't want to use that one. So the square root of 4, we're going to mark that off, is 2. So I'm going to multiply it to that 2. So it's minus 12, and what's left over is the square root of 3. Plus, we have this plus sign here. We're going to work on this square root of 80. So when I think of the square root of 80, I start thinking of what perfect square goes into that. I think we had one of those on our other lessons. So 80, let's do divided by 25, because 25 is a square root, and that's not. So let's go down. 80 divided by 16 is 5. So this would be 16 times 5. So the square root of 16 is 4, so we're going to mark that off. We have to multiply that there on the outside. So 9 times 4 is 36, and I have the square root of 5. Now I've got to look. Everything's been simplified. So I got to see, it's like combining like terms. Which ones am I able to combine together? So this is the square root of 5. Let me see if there's another square root of 5. And there is. It's this plus 36. So I can add 6 square root of 5 plus 36 square root of 5, which is 42 square root of 5. I'm actually going to write my answer down here at the end. 42 square root of 5. Now, what do I do with this minus 12 square root of 3? Do I just throw it away, just not write it down? Well, no, because it's part of the problem. But I don't get to combine it with anything. So I'm just going to write minus 12 square root 3. This is your simplified answer of you subtracting, adding and subtracting on this one. Okay, let's skip to 23. And that should conclude for today's lesson. And there may be even some that you have to do that when you simplify them down, you don't combine any of them. You just simplify them. And some of those, that happens on some, not all of them, maybe just like 1 or 2. So remember that when you're working on your homework. So this is number 23. It's the last one for today. So when we look at number 23, it's 3 square root 24 minus the square root of 150 plus 2 square root 48 minus the square root of 54. So let's get started on this. So let me make sure I wrote it right. 3 square root of 24 minus square root of 150 plus 2 square root of 48 minus square root of 54. There we go. Okay, so we can get started on this. So I think of this one, 3 square root 24. So when I think of 24, I know 4 times 6 is 24. So this 4 gets crossed off because the square root of 4 is 2, so we multiply it by 2, and that 6 gets to stay in there. So I get 6 square root 6. And we're going to subtract this here. So we have 150. So 150 divided by 100, that's a decimal, so we can't use that one. So, but I know 150 divided by 25 would probably work, and it does. It's 6. And the reason I picked 25 is because anything like that that looks like money, 150 reminds me of $1.50, we can use 25. So when I do this one, it's 25 times 6. So the square root of 25 is 5, so it gets to mark off and go on the outside. Square root 6. The square root of 6 can't break down. Let's write our plus sign. So now we're going to go to 2 square root of 48. So what times what equals 48? Well, I know 6 times 8 is 48, but 6 and 8 are not perfect squares. So I'm going to go up to my different square roots. So I know that 4 can go into it, but it's not high enough. Let's see if 16, because 4 times 4 is 16, if that can go into it. So 48 divided by 16, 48 divided by 16, we get 3. So that works. So 16 times 3. The square root of 16 is 4, so we mark that off and we get to multiply that 4 out there. And we get 8. What's left over is that square root 3. Minus the square root of 54. So when I think of 54, I get 9 times 6 is 54. 9 times 6. And I picked 9 times 6 because 9 is a perfect square root. So the square root of 9 is 3. So that gets to move to the outside. So I get 3 square root 6. Now I get to look to see what I get to combine together. I have a square root of 6, a negative 5 square root of 6, and a negative 3 square root of 6. And I've got this positive 8 square root of 3. So I'm going to go ahead and write that 8 square root of 3 because I see there's nothing else to combine him with. So now I'm going to go 6 minus 5 is 1. Then minus 3 is minus 2 or negative 2 square root 6 is our answer. So that's it for adding and subtracting radicals. Make sure you check what numbers you need to do in Google Classroom and get your assignment completed and turned in.